You're listening to Sports Connections with David Smale, the show that brings you a fun and intimate look into connections throughout sports. Now here's your host, David Smale.
I first met Clark Kellogg at the 1982 NBA draft in New York. We were in line next to each other for the buffet before the draft started, and we exchanged greetings. I was very impressed with this very polite, very large young man. Little did I know that nearly 20 years later, we would become good friends. Kellogg had decided to leave Ohio State after his junior year. After two Hall of Famers, James Worthy and Dominique Wilkins, were selected in the first three picks, a couple more picks were made, and it came time for the hometown Knicks to make their selection at number 6. Fans in attendance wanted the 6'8" power forward, and they started chanting, "Kellogg, Kellogg." Commissioner Larry O'Brien stepped to the microphone and announced, "The New York Knicks select Trent Tucker, guard, Minnesota." The crowd erupted in anger, booing Tucker. Now, Tucker had a decent career, but the young man never had a chance to become a fan favorite in New York. He spent 9 of his 11 years in the NBA playing for the Knicks, starting about 30% of his games and averaging 8.6 points per game. Meanwhile, Kellogg landed on the 1983 All-Rookie team after averaging 20.1 points and 10.5 rebounds per game. Knee injuries cut his career short, but he still averaged 18.9 points and 9.5 rebounds per game for his career. Since retiring as a player, Clark has crafted an impressive career as a broadcaster. He was part of the broadcast crew for the Indiana Pacers, where he spent his entire 5-year career from 88 through 2011, and he's been part of CBS's college basketball coverage since 93. He's one of the most gracious and friendly people in all of sports, and it's my pleasure to welcome him to the show. Clark, welcome to Sports Connections.
Yeah, great to be with you, David. And I hadn't remembered what you shared about the 82 draft. I do remember those Knicks fans that were in attendance at the Felt Forum way back in the day, chanting my name. And they were disappointed when the Knicks selected Trent Tucker, who I had competed against in college. He went to the University of Minnesota. They actually beat us my junior year on the last day of the season to win the outright Big Ten championship. We could have actually shared the title had we won that game at Minnesota. But Trent, gracious guy, really good guy, had a really outstanding college and solid pro career. I think he was part of one of the Bulls championship teams, if I'm not mistaken. So and I've caught him on the air. He's doing some broadcasting too. I've caught him recently. I haven't talked to him in a while, but it seems like he's doing well.
Yeah. How did that make you feel to have the fans chanting for you to be their selection?
Yeah, it was really crazy. I was caught off guard by it, quite honestly. It was surprising, and surely it made me feel good that they knew enough about my game to, and you know how New York folks are and fans are. They are pretty knowledgeable about the game. They'll let you know how knowledgeable about the game they are, and it's always one of the great places to play. We had a chance to play at Madison Square Garden when I was at Ohio State. We played Princeton.
Okay.
Then I obviously played against the Knicks teams in the early mid-'80s when Bernard King was wreaking havoc on everybody. So always enjoyed going to New York. I mean, the energy, the electricity, the appreciation for the game and for good players, whether you were wearing the Knicks uniform or not, is something that was always part of the New York scene. So, no, it made me feel good back in 1982.
How did they treat you when you came as a member of the Pacers for those 5 or 6 years?
They booed, but they always were respectful. I mean, again, New York fans, and that's not uncommon. There are places, Indiana, throughout the state. You go to Kentucky, you go to Portland, where the fan base is great, where they are. Seattle, when there was a team there. Those folks love NBA basketball, and they cheer hard for their teams, but they also respect good players and players from the opposition. So I always felt like I gained respect whenever I showed up in New York, and always found that to be edifying and uplifting, even if we didn't come out on top in the game sometimes.
Yeah, well, it probably wasn't as volatile as the way they treated Reggie Miller, but I think they appreciated what Reggie could do. They just didn't appreciate that he did it against them.
No doubt, and I was actually able to witness some of that in my role as a broadcaster during that time. Reggie got drafted the summer that I had to retire, David. It was 1987 when I ultimately had to give up playing because of my knee injuries, and Reggie was drafted. So I got to follow his whole career as a broadcaster. I wish I could have been on the court with him, but if I couldn't do that, then having a front row seat for some of his great moments and those teams' great moments was quite a ride.
Indiana worked out well for you, I think we can say. Talk about how life could have been different had you been selected 6th overall by the Knicks. You ever give much thought to that?
I don't. I really try not to go back, but I do on occasion, and certainly when I was in Indiana, on occasion I thought about what New York would have been like. I'm a Midwest guy. I grew up in Cleveland, went to college at Ohio State, played my professional basketball in Indianapolis. So those were comfortable places for me. And I'm quite honestly, I'm thrilled, even though I didn't play as long as I wanted to, David. I'm really happy with having been able to start my real adult life in Indianapolis. It wasn't too far from Columbus. My wife, Rosie, is from Columbus. Tons of friends through my time at Ohio State there. Indianapolis, a similar city to Columbus. So it was really comfortable. And then the biggest thing for me when I got drafted by the Pacers, in addition to the proximity to Ohio, was that Herb Williams, a good friend and a former college teammate of mine, had already spent a year with the Pacers.
Right.
So when I got there as a rookie, he broke me in completely. He was a veteran, a good friend, somebody I knew, had played with, and really helped me get off to a good start in my NBA career. And we're still close friends to this day, but he really showed me the ropes of being a pro player in Indianapolis when I first got there, and I'm forever grateful for that. So I don't think too much about the bright lights and big city of New York. I love visiting there. I get a chance to go there quite a bit as a broadcaster, but I'm happy that it worked out the way it did. Again, I'm a Midwest fibered guy, so that was comfortable for me.
Now, I know the answer to this question. You and I have talked many times over the years, but I'm going to ask it for recording purposes here. You had Hall of Fame caliber statistics in your 5-year career. Any regrets that you didn't get to play longer?
Yeah, the greatest regret I have is that our teams were struggling at that time, David. We were near the bottom of the pack in the NBA, and I really regret that I didn't have a chance to be part of playoff caliber teams. We were headed in that direction, clearly, with drafting Reggie in 87. Actually, Chuck Person was drafted in 86 and had a terrific NBA career. Rick Smits came in 88. I don't know if I would have still been part of the Pacers team during that time, but I was only 26 when I had to retire. So clearly I may have still been part of that organization. And I do have regrets about not having a chance to participate or compete in the playoffs, because that's another level. And then it would have been fun just to see if I could have become an all-star, if I could have become a top-notch player amongst the best of the best. I know I had a chance, but that'll never be fully known what my career could have been, because it was ended early.
Sure. And just talk about the transition into broadcasting. Was that something you always thought about doing? Did it just happen after you announced your retirement? Just when and how did you decide to pursue broadcasting?
You know, I had a great love affair with basketball from the time I was really 9 or 10 years old. I drank it, slept it, ate it, watched it, talked about it with my dad. I mean, I really immersed myself in the game, which is the case for most players that get to the NBA level. There's a real love affair with the game. And so that was how I embraced basketball. I anticipated playing hopefully for 10 or 12 years and then moving on to the next chapter. I never thought about broadcasting. I was more interested in perhaps becoming a business entrepreneur. I got my property and casualty insurance license through a mentor of mine in Cleveland, Ira Novak, and was really fascinated by the business world, selling property and casualty insurance, understanding how different businesses are successful, seeing other former athletes carve out successful entrepreneur paths once they were done playing. So I was thinking along those lines. So broadcasting was not something I gave a ton of thought to. But when I gave up, when I had to stop playing, David, I still had a ton of basketball in me. I knew I didn't really want to coach, but I wanted to still be around the game. And, you know, I've always enjoyed words and reading and communicating. My mother admonished me to be articulate and well-spoken if I was going to be behind a microphone as a player. So I took that to heart. Was always sought out by the media when I was playing, and enjoyed that interaction. Enjoyed studying the game. Enjoyed listening to other commentators. So when I got a chance with the Pacers on radio in 1987, I said this would be a neat way to try to stay in the game and maybe add some value to the broadcast. So I jumped in both feet, and it's been well over 30 years now that I've still been at it, primarily on television the last 30 plus years.
Sure. So on behalf of all of my fellow media members who are always looking for a post-game quote, thank you for being the guy. Win or lose, we knew. You know, we have a few of those here in Kansas City. You know, in the Royals playoff run in 14 and 15, we knew good game, bad game. We could go to Eric Hosmer, and he would always have something we could use. And so, thank you for that, for being that guy for your career. Now, you obviously took well to it. You know, a lot of former players are hired, and some of them stick with it for a couple of years, and then their listeners tell them they're not any good. You obviously took to it well. When did you figure out that it was something not just to keep you in basketball, but it was something that you were good at and that you wanted to pursue on a long-term basis?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Fairly early on, David, I got the feeling that I could be good at it and that I wanted to be good at it. I wanted to excel. Again, I've always enjoyed reading and communicating. My mother's admonishment, my late mom's admonishment about being able to put together a sentence if you were going to be interviewed after these basketball games you're playing in was going to be what she graded me on. My on-court performance was, she would look at that, but she was interested in how I handled and carried myself all the time. And I never forgot that. So I felt early on that I had a chance to do it well. And again, I like words and trying to be creative in how you break down the game, leveraging my unique perspective and experience in the game to the benefit of viewers is something that I looked at as a challenge and a fun challenge. And so there we go. And so early on, I thought I had a chance. I was rough around the edges, just like anybody starting something new, but I had potential.
Yeah.
And my broadcast partners gave me good tidbits. My producers and directors were very helpful early on. And then I did the work that's necessary to try to establish my own style, be myself, and try to be true to the game and true to the viewer. And here we are, still going at it.
Speaking of style, you became known for some of your catchphrases. I'm going to mention a few. I want you to tell me what they mean and where they came from. First one, maybe the most famous one, is spurtability.
Yeah, that goes directly to the 1996 Kentucky Wildcats championship team. Antoine Walker, Tony Delk, Walter McCarty, Ron Mercer. I'm leaving a couple of guys out. But that team in that season, I think they ended up winning the tournament by a double-digit margin average. I think we've only had a couple of teams do that. Villanova recently comes to mind, but I think when they did it, they were maybe one of the few in the modern era to win their tournament games by a double-digit margin average. And their spurtability, the ability to put together spurts in the game, 10-2, 12-2, 14-zip, to be able to blitzkrieg teams with those mini spurts, created that word spurtability. And it's directly attributable to that 1996 NCAA championship team, one of the best on record, certainly during my time, but historically, I think it's one of the top teams that has won it all.
Do you plan these ahead of time, or
you know what, David? I am always looking for ways to describe the redundant game of basketball differently and in a way that people can understand it. So if I hear a phrase, whether it be slang or something that's not common that I can fit into a basketball analogy, I'll put it in my new phrases notebook or analogies notebook, and I won't force it unless the opportunity presents itself. So I've got a running inventory of words that I think will make for a good basketball descriptor or analogy. And then I try to make sure I'm refreshing my memory of those as I go into games, because there are certain players or teams that these words would fit better than others.
Yeah.
So I've always got an inventory, and I'm always adding to it. and it could be something I'm reading from a novel. It could be something that goes on a daily basis. I love food and common occurrence analogies because everybody can relate to those.
Yeah.
Not everybody can relate to the basketball jargon that those of us who play and coach have, but everybody can relate to some of the common things that are part of our lives. So food is one that I tend to use quite a bit. And then just the everyday occurrences that people can maybe relate to and get a chuckle out of.
All right. The next one is a food one, squeezing the orange.
Yeah. Well, the basketball has got many slang names: peel, pumpkin, orange, rock. And so if you want to be fruitful in the game of basketball, squeezing the orange is taking care of it. That's basically what it means. If you're going to squeeze the orange, if you're going to be fruitful and produce good orange juice, you got to take care of the ball. You got to squeeze it. So that's in reference to turning it over, and actually it's in reference to not turning it over. Squeeze that orange, take care of it, and usually good things happen for you.
All right. The next one, stat sheet stuffer. And that sounds like somebody you'd want to be, but it's not necessarily. It's somebody who's, go ahead.
Well, it is actually what you would want to be. It's somebody that's a triple-double threat. In other words, every column on the stat sheet, this particular player is able to put some meaningful numbers in it. And so it was just a way, and I love alliterations. I think people can remember alliterations, words or phrases that start with the same letter. So when you're thinking about stuff in the stat sheet, I said, how can I make that into a noun or a descriptor? So stat sheet stuffer. And then I have another level. A stat sheet stuffer is a guy or girl who makes contributions in every area of the game, but a stat sheet stuffer supreme is the highest level of stuffing the stat sheet. So there's a different level. Like a stat sheet stuffer supreme would be an all-American stat sheet stuffer. And so it's just another way, an alliteration, and it tends to resonate with people and they remember it.
See, because to me, when I first heard that, maybe I misinterpreted it, but it was somebody who was looking for to only work on stats and not be a team player. There's none of that.
No. Most of mine are always on the positive side. I'm always tilting toward the positive whenever I commentate. So this is more on the positive side. Somebody that's impacting the game in a lot of ways. Okay.
All right. The next one is one of my favorites. You talk about the point or down in the paint when there's 6 bodies in there from 2 different teams, and you say it's tighter than an airplane lavatory.
And everybody who's flown and has been in one of those airplane lavatories knows how tight it is for the average size person.
Yeah.
And I'm 6'8". So just imagine, it's an ugly sight trying to see me navigate, working my way into a position in some of those airplane bathrooms. But again, it's just a way to paint a picture of what is going on the court. And that's a tight area. There's not a lot of room to operate in that kind of space.
And instead of walls and tiny sinks and a door that slides towards you and stuff like that, there's bodies trying to steal the ball from you.
That's right. It's all limbs. It's all sinew and muscle down there. And most of those guys are pretty big when you're talking about doing work in the paint.
Yeah. Well, I had to look up some. Those were ones that I remembered. And I looked up one that I think may be your best one ever when you were describing Indiana's Victor Oladipo, who later went and played for the Pacers. And you said, he's like a baby's bottom, smooth and sometimes explosive.
Yeah. And again, that was one that just came to me. A lot of times I'm reading, I'm thinking, I'm watching my kids or what have you, and things come to me and then I'll just write them down. And that was one that I knew would, at the right time, would have a way of resonating with folks, because most folks understand what that refers to. And it's just another way to have fun connecting common occurrences to the beautiful game of basketball or to basketball players. And that's one that's gotten a lot of life. And a lot of times folks will shout that one out at me on occasion when I'm traveling around.
What does Victor think of it?
Oh, I think he liked it. Yeah, I think he liked it. I had one that was that I used for Jalen Rose. He's as versatile as a potato. Sometimes he's baked or mashed, fried or hashed. And so again, another way to look at a potato in its multiple forms and Jalen had that kind of game. And so I tagged that one. He came right up to me not long after he heard it and said he liked it. And Victor did too. They like those that accentuate their games in a positive way. Yeah.
Do you have any other favorites that I haven't mentioned?
I've always enjoyed the Chinese food one, which is you enjoy it, but it always leaves you wanting a little more. And so that can refer to a player that teases you with his or her ability. You see some flashes, but you don't see it consistently, or you don't see enough of it. So that can be applied with the Chinese food reference. Yeah, it tastes really good, but you always feel like you should and want more.
All right. How is the rush of adrenaline as a broadcaster different from the way it was as a player?
David, there's nothing like playing. I don't think that's why you find in the world of sports, particularly those that have gotten to the highest level, it doesn't matter what the sport is, that may have a tough time adjusting to life outside of that space, because there's nothing that quite satisfies or excites like that adrenaline of competing, of fan adulation, of excitement, of winning, of putting your best on the line against somebody else. There are very few things in life that can compare to that because of the way sports is esteemed in our culture and world. I mean, there's an adulation, that can be really intoxicating, but it's not real and it's not lasting. It's something that's not substantive in many ways in terms of the big picture in life. So it's a rush and an adrenaline and an injection that if you continue to try to find that, you can be disappointed when you leave the game. So playing is another level. The broadcasting, I still get butterflies. I still am excited about being in the arena or in the gym or at the venue. I'm excited about working with the folks I work with. I still have a great love and enthusiasm and excitement for it, but I'm not the show as a broadcaster. I'm on the periphery.
Yeah.
The players are the marquee attraction, and the coaches are supporting role members, more marquee guys in college than in the pros. But the players and coaches are the center of attention when you're calling a game, and you just want to help viewers enjoy it.
Yeah.
And you want to, at least my perspective is to try to serve the game well, to be true to the game, be true to myself, and to hopefully enhance the viewer's experience as they're watching it.
But there is some similarity, I would think, because you have the same preparation, or you have preparation, you have the desire to win, to have a good broadcast, to be able to know when to make a comment and when not to, and all those things. Is there a similarity between maybe your playing career helped you as a broadcaster?
Oh, there's no question about it. I see some parallels. Clearly, you are performing. You are being scrutinized in a way that doesn't happen to a lot of folks. I mean, you are being listened to and paid attention to and scrutinized, much like you are when you play. And there is a level of outcome that's immediate in terms of feedback. Did you miss anything? Did you add to what took place? Did you stay out of the way when you needed to? So, yeah, I think there clearly are some parallels and some similarities. And that's part of the reason that I think you find former players and coaches enjoying doing it and doing it well, because it does have some of the same elements that are part of having been on the court or on the field or on the track or whatever sport it might be.
Sure. I'm going to mention a couple of comparisons and ask for your favorite in each one. You've broadcast college and pro basketball. Which do you enjoy more and why?
The energy and enthusiasm of the college game in normal circumstances is unique because it's pretty constant game to game. The NBA obviously is really great. It's the highest level of basketball that you can find in the world, and the guys are really, really, really good. I mean, it is crazy how good they are when you're up close to it on a regular basis. It's so different in terms of the quality of the talent when you get to the pros. But the college game, for its energy and enthusiasm, would be my preference if I only could choose to do one. I'm thankful that I had a long run in both games as a broadcaster, because I think it's helped my appreciation for both games. But if I had to choose one, I would go college.
All right. And you've been a color analyst on radio, on the radio and on TV. Which do you prefer there?
I started in radio with the Pacers back in 1987. I did 2 seasons of radio before I transitioned full time to television. And recently I've done Westwood One for the Final Four the last 6 years with Coach John Thompson and Kevin Kugler. And it's been fun going back to the future for me, because radio is a different canvas. It's really the play-by-play announcer's canvas, quite honestly, because there's so much he has to provide to the listener that you don't necessarily have to do when you've got the screen and the game in front of you. So it requires a little more discipline and a little more reservation on radio, and you have to be able to pack valuable analysis into breaks in the action more. You can't talk over the action, right? Because the play-by-play guy needs to be describing that. So I enjoy them both. Television is a better medium for the analyst in basketball, but radio is more challenging and, quite honestly, as enjoyable, not more enjoyable, but as enjoyable for me.
Okay. So you don't have a preference in that area.
TV, if you forced me to choose, if you stuck me up and held me up and said, hey, you got to pick one, I would go television.
I'd have to do it like this, but yeah.
But if you made me come up with one or the other, it would be TV. Okay.
And then there's a third area, and that's being in the studio instead of at the game. How different is that for you?
I got my start primarily with CBS in the studio. That's primarily why they hired me when my contract at ESPN expired in 1997. And at ESPN, for those 8 years I was there, I had done both. I had done games, primarily games, but I had also done studio work, which is pretty much the practice at ESPN. A lot of the analysts, at least in basketball, do both studio and games. And it was really great training for me because I've been able to establish some competency in both. And that adds to my versatility. If you were thinking of me as a player, I would be a stat sheet stuffer as an analyst, because I can comfortably handle the smaller windows of talking time in the studio in addition to the broader canvas of doing games. And I really enjoy both. At this season in my career, at this stage, I'm really happy to get a handful of games, anywhere from 5 to 10. I'm still involved with Westwood One calling the Final Four, so that scratches the game calling itch for me. But I enjoy the studio, particularly during the tournament with Kenny and Charles and Ernie Johnson from TNT, Greg Gumbel, Seth Davis, Adam Zucker, the other guys. So we've got great talent and good guys that I work with. But for now, at this point in my journey, David, I like the fact that I'm a little more studio heavy than game heavy.
How do you get a word in with Kenny and Charles and all those guys? I mean, I would be over there going, I have an opinion. No. How do you do it?
It's a team game. It's a team game. And we all get plenty of opportunity to share our opinions, and it's conversational. There are times when in the studio, whether it's with Kenny and Charles and Ernie and Greg or other folks in the past that I've worked with, that you're not always going to be able to say everything that you'd like to say. Right. And that's just part of it. You've got a shot clock there, and it's important that you understand and recognize that. And I get plenty of opportunities. So yeah, it's always fun. Sometimes they go through shot clock expirations, Kenny and Charles, when they get on a point, but it all works out and evens out. I find my windows when they're there, and it makes for good television. At least that's what our bosses and the viewers have been saying. So we'll stay with what we've been doing.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious that, when the merger with, I don't know, merger is the right word, but when CBS gave up some of the rights to TNT, and you guys kind of combined studio groups, thinking, I loved watching you and Seth, because you both, you come from different perspectives, but your commentary is much more succinct, much more on target. And Kenny and Charles are just being Kenny and Charles.
Exactly.
worked really well, and you've blended with them well. I'm just, I don't have a question. I'm just comment. I love the
No, I
band
appreciate that.
back and
Yeah,
forth.
that's kind of been the consensus as people offer their feedback. Again, we all know basketball.
Yeah.
And clearly the flow and vibe of an NBA studio show is much more unscripted and loose. Whereas in the college game, there's so many more players, so many more teams that you have to have some level
Right.
of zeroing in and targeting. But the two have blended well. And I think part of it is mutual respect. And we have fun. And we do know that basketball is fun. And we became partners with Turner in 2011. From 2011 until 13, I was out calling the games with Jim Nance and Steve Kerr, which I enjoyed, and then went back into the studio in 14 and have just really enjoyed continuing to develop with Kenny and Charles and Ernie and Greg. And everybody seems to be happy with it. I know we have fun, and hopefully that comes across when people are watching.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you mentioned that you did Final Four for 3 years on TV, and you've done Final Four radio. Even though you're a studio host at the Final Four, you jump over to the radio booth when they throw it to to Jim and Raph and
Right.
Greg Hill. Do you have a favorite memory of all those Final Fours that you've been a part of?
Wow, man. I tell you, probably the game that I enjoyed the most when I was out calling games with Jim Nance was probably the Louisville, Michigan game in 13. That was the last one I called, actually, but it was really entertaining. Both teams played extremely well. Louisville came back to win, but it was an exciting, high-level game. The Virginia Texas Tech game, which I was calling on radio, that's the last championship game we saw. That was back in 19, was really good, high level. And that story of Virginia having lost the year before as the only and first number one seed to lose to a 16 seed is something I'm on record as saying I didn't think would happen as long as I was broadcasting. I just didn't anticipate it happening, but it did. And then for them to come back the next year and win it all, and the way they did it. It was not just that game, the championship game, which was dramatic. The semifinal game was dramatic, but they had multiple dramatic finishes on the run from infamy to glorious champion. I mean, I don't know if that'll happen again in the time that I've got left to broadcast. That was just a remarkable story. But my best moment related to the tournament is back in 2012 when our son, our youngest of our three children, Nick Kellogg, had a chance to play on a Ohio University Bobcat team that got to the Sweet 16 and then lost that game in overtime to North Carolina. And really to see him have that kind of success and to have a one shining moment of his own with his team, that goes right to the top of my list as far as tournament memories. I can't think about the tournament without thinking about that first.
Yeah, and I will get back to that. I'm glad you brought that up, but I've got a question. I've kind of got an order to my questions, and that's later in the order. Yeah. One of my favorites that you did was the Butler Duke championship game.
Yeah.
I thought that might be one of your favorites because you didn't have to travel because it was in Indianapolis, and just the David versus Goliath thing and the fact that, Butler almost won had and I've talked to Jim Nance about this, had Hayward's shot gone in from half court, that might be the biggest or the greatest college basketball game of all time.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that because it is in my top 5. In part for some of the reasons you mentioned. I mean, it was a short drive and the city was absolutely on fire.
Yeah.
It was on fire, David, because you know how woven into the fabric of Indiana basketball is. And Butler so epitomized everything that Indiana basketball believes it is, what it represents, underdog, coming together. I mean, there were so many elements of that. And then obviously Duke, perennial championship caliber program, Hall of Fame coach. Lucas Oil Stadium was fairly new. I think it had opened maybe a few years earlier, but I think that may have been the first Final Four there.
I think you're right.
2010. Yeah. So all of that, and man, oh man, I tell you, the public practices, I think had 25,000 there, which is rare. I mean, typically there are good crowds, particularly when you're in the heart of the country, but Indiana is special. Butler was special. So that would clearly be in my top 5 in terms of Final Four experiences and being part of, for sure.
Doesn't Butler play in the on a regular basis in the gym where Hoosiers was supposed to have taken place? Is that
Hinkle Fieldhouse. Hinkle Fieldhouse. And actually this year, because the tournament is going to be in one region, Hinkle will actually host some games, which will be a great experience, I think, for those players and coaches who've not experienced Hinkle. I mean, it's a great old, freshened up basketball field house, similar to Allen Fieldhouse, which you know well, being in Kansas City, but it has the old historic feel with some of the modern amenities, which make for a very unique venue and viewing experience, not to mention how great the fans are in both places. So that'll be, I think, a lot of fun for the city and for the players and coaches.
And I wasn't planning on asking this, but since you brought it up, will your studio be in Indianapolis, since that's where all the action is, or will you still be in New York?
I would think we'll still be in New York. We have not talked about it, but over the years, obviously, we've always done the first 2 weekends in New York. It's just much easier for all of the people that make that happen to be in one place, and I don't anticipate that changing. And then ultimately, as has been in the past, we have a set built for us in the Final Four venue where we do our halftime, pregame shows and so forth. So I'm anticipating, even though everything is a lot different this year, I'm anticipating that won't be different, that we would still man the desk from New York the first 2 weekends and then plan ourselves in Indianapolis for the Final Four weekend.
I'm going to ask you a question that could take another 2 hours to answer, but I want you to be as succinct. I want you to realize there's a shot clock here. Why is the Final Four so special?
Well, it's a combination of 4 teams all believing they've got a chance to win it all. And it draws in people both rabid and casual from all pockets of the sports viewing world. And that, to me, is what makes it special.
Maybe it's different as a player, but you've experienced it from different perspectives now. To me, it seems like reaching the Final Four is a bigger deal than winning the national championship. Once you're there, you want to win the whole thing. But people hang Final Four banners, whether they lost in the semis or not. It's like, last year my Chiefs reached the Super Bowl for the first time in 50 years and then won it. And I tell people I was way more excited and emotional winning the AFC championship game than I was when they won the Super Bowl. Do you think that's true, that it's the goal is reaching the Final Four even more than winning the national championship?
Well, I certainly think so. I don't think there's any question about it, because there's a level of achievement and specialness to being one of the 4 teams left standing. And it all culminates in that weekend. So getting there when you've started the journey with 68 other teams is quite a celebration and quite an achievement. And there's nothing quite like the semifinal Saturday.
Yeah.
You'll hear many of my colleagues talk about the 4 teams and their fan bases and the excitement and the electricity, because all 4 are hopeful that they'll be playing on Monday night. And there's so much attention on those 4 schools and players and programs that you're right. It is a culmination. It's not the end of the journey, but it certainly is close enough to it where you can celebrate the fact that you're one of the 4, and that's special. And it remains special for a lifetime for those that get a chance to experience it.
Yeah, I've covered many first and second round games and regional games and things like that. I've had the opportunity to go to 7 different Final Fours. There's just something different there. Just, you can't, unless you've been there, you can't really describe it adequately, but it is definitely it's a carnival. It's a festival. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's a qualitative experience. You can't really quantify it. It's 4 teams, it's 4 fan bases, but it's really a celebration of college basketball on so many levels. You think about all the coaches that gather for their convention and everybody attached or attracted to college basketball in some form or fashion is there typically and celebrating it and looking forward to it. So it does make for a special festival around the game of college basketball.
Now, I don't want to make you feel old, but your journey in college basketball is more than 40 years old. And
I know.
Do you remember the events or the people involved more?
The people. Yeah, the people. Again, thinking back to my college days, we got to the tournament 2 of my 3 years at Ohio State, lost in the Sweet 16 when the field was smaller, lost to a UCLA team that ultimately went to the Final Four, and it was in Indianapolis in 1980. That was my freshman season. My second year, we didn't get there. My third year, we lost in an 8-9 matchup to James Madison, and really were favored there. But the magnitude of it had not gotten to the point or level that it has grown to now. And at that point, I was thinking about moving on after my junior year. So it didn't hold the same captivation for me on the personal level. But in all things, I think no matter what the experience is, it's enriched by the people.
Yeah.
And so much like my journey as a broadcaster, I love the event, but it's the people you get a chance to do it with, some of the family that you get a chance to bring into that tent to see what that's like. All of that is really special. The people always are going to be the real driving, memorable force when you think about some of your experiences in the game of college hoops, for me anyway.
Yeah. So you lost to Kiki and the Kids in 1980.
Yeah, we did. Larry Brown was the head coach, and he ended up coaching the Pacers while I was broadcasting. And there wouldn't be many opportunities that he would miss out on reminding me of that particular because we were a loaded team. I mean, we were loaded. Herb Williams, myself, Calvin Ramsey was a terrific player, had a nice pro career. Herb had a long pro career. Jim Smith we were loaded and ended up losing to that team, and it still leaves a little bit of a bad feeling in my stomach. But I try to live. I try to live in the present, David, and not dwell on what coulda, woulda, or should have been.
There you go. Speaking of people, you had a famous game of horse with a fairly well-known person. Just talk about that experience.
It's amazing. People bring that up fairly often, and I marvel at what God did in bringing me into the presence and company of a sitting president, not only a sitting president, but the first Black president of the United States. And we were connected through basketball. Basketball gave me that opportunity 4 times, not just the POTUS match, but he joined Vern Lundquist and I prior to that in a guest commentary role at a game we were doing. I think it was Duke Georgetown back in 2009. And then we got the POTUS game videoed and done in 2010. And right when he was kicking off his second campaign, he was at the First Four in Dayton and with British Prime Minister Cameron, and that allowed me the privilege to interview him at halftime. And then we had another opportunity to talk about our love for basketball, him coaching his daughters. Basketball. I mean, I still marvel and I'm floored that that happened. It's one of my great memories. And he loves the game, knows the game, can really shoot it.
Yeah, he's pretty good, isn't he?
Yeah, and nipped me at the wire. And I tried to get a rematch, David, but he gave me the Heisman on that. He wouldn't let me try to get him back.
Man.
Yeah, he did. He sure did. Yeah.
All right.
It's a great memory, and one that I'll cherish for a lifetime.
Last question. You talked about your youngest son playing at the University of Ohio, or Ohio U, I guess it's called. And what I remember about that is that while you were broadcasting another game, the score scrolled across the bottom of the screen, and you let your guard down, or maybe you intended to do this, I don't know, but you said, "Way to go, Bobcats," or words to that effect. What do you remember about that particular time?
Man, just the pure joy and the thrill for him. I mean, when your kids are doing something they enjoy and they're having some success, there's nothing that compares to that. I mean, I've had my journey and had my moments, but when your kids are excelling, our daughter played volleyball in college. Both boys played hoops in college. Our oldest son just for a couple of years at Providence. But when they excel and are doing well, and that run that Nick and his team had just gave us all such a thrill. There were butterflies and tense moments, but the joy of it still resonates. And that's the case. So, I just, I was keeping an eye on it. Thanks to technology, I was calling our game in between breaks. I had my iPad working and keeping track of their score. And CBS was obviously keeping track of all the other games. And I just, it was just an emotional response. It wasn't anything pre-planned or premeditated. It was just my excitement coming through for the Bobcats and Nick.
Did you get any feedback positively or negatively about
All
that?
positive, all positive. Everything was positive because everybody, again, as an analyst, I try to use things that everybody can relate to in describing the game. That's something that everybody can relate to. Work, your job may be keeping you away from something your children are doing. That happens to everybody.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be public figures for them to be able to relate to that. I mean, that's real. And I got tons of letters and comments via social media around the shared excitement and the understanding of the joy and the disappointment of not being there. We were on the opposite sides. Actually, we were on the same days. The OU Bobcats were playing the same days that I was assigned to work. Had they been on the opposite side, I think we were both Friday, Sundays. Had they been Thursday, Saturday, I would have found a way to get to the game
back and
in between.
Forth,
yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, no question. No question. I would have made that happen for sure. But the fact that we were on the same days, funny story about that, when we got the field the night of Selection Sunday, the field is announced, and then CBS is scrambling to pair announcers to tell you where you're going. I got a text from Nick not long after he saw where the Bobcats were going. In big capital letters, he said, "Dad, tell them to send you to Nashville." Because that's where they were going. They were going to Nashville. So my wife and oldest son got a chance to take in those games, but obviously I was committed to being in Greensboro. I think we were working the games with Jim and the rest of the crew. So I made a way. And then CBS on the second weekend, because the games are so staggered, CBS actually provided a monitor for me.
Oh, cool.
Next to my position because the games were staggered by about a half an hour. So as I was getting ready for our game in Atlanta, and the teams were warming up, I had a chance to pretty much watch the first half of Nick's game against Carolina. And then I caught the overtime as we were finishing up our broadcast that night.
Well, I think the reason people, besides the fact that they could relate, is they know when you're broadcasting, they're not getting a canned speech. They're not getting I don't want to make this sound bad, like you're not preparing. They're getting a real person sharing his love and his emotion, love for the game and stuff. So the fact that you shared your emotion of seeing that your son had success didn't vary from the Clark that they felt like they knew from watching you for years.
No, I really appreciate you saying that because I've always tried to be genuine. In other words, if you were to watch a game with me at my home, I would hope it would be the same guy that you hear when you're watching on the screen. Yeah. Because I have a genuine enthusiasm, not just for the game, but for life and for people. And that's who I am. I mean, people will tell you that that's who I am. I'm upbeat and positive. I'm a Christian. I'm a man of faith. I thank God for the joy he pours into my heart through his son, Jesus Christ. And I try to live that. And that doesn't mean I don't have moments, but generally I'm excited and enthused about what I'm doing when I'm doing it. And when it comes to basketball, there's still a bit of a love affair that I have with that game.
Sure. Just wrap it up with what about your family, your wife, and what she does and what your kids are doing now that they're through with playing sports.
Yeah, we've got 3 adult children. Yeah, our daughter is an executive assistant at Chipotle. They're actually building a home office in Columbus, Ohio, of all places. So she's been there for a little over a year. Our oldest son is actually in the early stages of grad school, medical school. He's studying to be an anesthesiologist assistant, an AA. So he's hopeful to be in scrubs and tennis shoes in 2022, putting people to sleep and waking them back up. So he's grinding away. He's married with 2 children. Our daughter has a little girl. And then Nick, our youngest, had been playing overseas since he left OU. He's been playing in Finland and Poland and France. Didn't go back because of COVID and is currently in a paid internship position with the Milwaukee Bucks as a video coordinator, getting a chance to see that side of the game, behind the curtain, if you will, and enjoying it, grinding away, but getting a great experience and really proud of all 3 of them. And we've got 3 grandchildren, 2 little girls that are 4, and a little pandemic baby, Hayden. Clark Hayden is going to be 1 in April. So yeah, family's good. Everybody's healthy, and we're grateful and fun watching our adult kids navigate their own journeys.
Yeah, isn't being a grandparent about the most fun job you can have?
Oh my goodness. The best I can come up with it, David, is indescribable joy. It's really all I can. That's the best I can come up with. And and those who are part of the Grandparents Club know exactly what I mean.
Yeah, you could be having a really lousy day. Our two were born in Louisville, and our daughter and her husband moved back to Kansas City about 2 years ago. And so now they're a 15-minute drive instead of a 9-hour drive. And I could be having the worst day possible, and that door opens up, and a 5-year-old and an almost 3-year-old run across the floor, Grandpa, and my day's perfect.
Oh yeah, man. I hear you. I know exactly what you're talking about, man. There's no greater joy than being able to share life with your kids and your grandkids. And
if they start to smell or start to act up, you give them back to mom and dad.
That's right. On loan. That's right. It's their turn to make that trip through parenthood.
Yeah. All right, my friend. It's always good to catch up with you. Thank you for the time, and I enjoyed this very much.
No, real pleasure. Thank you, David. And hopefully we'll be able to see each other face to face before too much longer. Maybe next hoop season.
Thanks for listening to Sports Connections with David Smale. Make sure to subscribe, follow, and rate the show from your favorite podcast platform. You can learn more about David Smale and his work by visiting davidsmalebooks.com. Don't forget to join us weekly for new episodes. Until next time.